This is Podcast Psychology. So here's something I think probably most of us have thought about, maybe even found a bit unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
How do people who seem, genuinely good, how do they end up doing things that are just, well, really not good at all?
Yeah. That's a big one, isn't it?
Hmm.
It really cuts to the heart of how we understand people, I think.
Yeah,
We often want things to be black and white, good versus bad.
right. Simple categories.
But the reality, as the material we looked at suggests, it's much more complex, more shades of gray.
Exactly. And that's kind of the knot we want to try and untangle in this deep dive today. We're going to explore the psychological landscape, I guess, that allows someone who seems principled to act, well, unexpectedly.
And the goal isn't judgment, right? It's about insight.
Precisely. Understanding the human dynamics underneath it all. And, one fascinating idea the source brings up right away is this thing it calls the good person paradox.
Yeah, the good person paradox. I thought that was a really compelling place to start. It highlights how someone with, really strong morals can, under certain kinds of pressure, actually behave in ways that completely contradict those principles.
It really makes you pause and question that basic idea we have, that sort of unchanging goodness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We almost assume it, don't we? Like a good person just stays good.
Yeah, it's like a fixed label. But the material really pushes back on that. It suggests that, well, change is possible for everyone in all directions, regardless of where they started morally.
And you have to remember, for a lot of people, being good isn't just about what they do. It's tied up in their identity, how they fundamentally see themselves.
So when they act against that,
Right. It creates this huge internal conflict. And it's deeply unsettling, not just for them, but for everyone around them who thought they knew who that person was.
it's like the ground shifts beneath their feet. And the source points out that even really strong, deeply held principles aren't like invincible. Life throws things at you, betrayal, deep pain.
These aren't small bumps in the road.
No, they can fundamentally alter someone's outlook, their whole way of operating.
Absolutely. And what's really key, I think, is that this shift, it's usually not sudden. It's not like flipping a switch.
Right, not a movie villain origin story.
Exactly. The source emphasizes it's more often this gradual wearing down, a slow erosion of values over time, almost invisible at first.
That makes a lot of sense. So, okay, what are some of the psychological triggers that can start this slow slide? The source mentions several, starting with stress and emotional pressure.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's fascinating how chronic stress, just that relentless feeling of being overwhelmed, can totally deplete our, mental and emotional batteries.
Okay.
It leads to exhaustion, and people can start behaving in ways they don't even recognize in themselves. Their usual ways of coping just stop working.
The source had this example about someone constantly caring for others, right? But without getting any support back.
Mm-hmm. The caregiver burnout scenario.
Mhm.
Over time, that initial empathy, that kindness, it can just dry up, and resentment starts to, well, bubble up instead.
And they might start wondering, was my kindness even worth it? Did anyone appreciate it?
That internal questioning is crucial. It's the beginning of doubting values that maybe felt absolute before. It's not always a conscious choice to be less good, but maybe more like a desperate reaction to feeling drained.
Okay, so stress is one factor. Another really powerful trigger mentioned was painful experiences like betrayal or really deep disappointment. Things that wound us.
Oh, definitely. When someone values loyalty, say, and then experiences a major betrayal, wow, that can just shatter their whole view of the world,
Yeah, trust is broken.
Exactly. And that can lead them to become cynical, defensive. They might pull back from being open or trusting, qualities that might have defined their goodness before. The pain becomes this filter for everything.
It's like that past hurt starts making decisions for them in the present, almost building a wall where kindness used to be. Then there's accumulated frustration. That feeling of being constantly overlooked or just failing again and again, that's got to wear you down too.
Oh, absolutely. That sense that your efforts just don't matter, or that
Yeah.
you keep hitting roadblocks. It breeds this deep resentment, can really twist your perspective, make you feel like the whole system is rigged.
So the focus shifts.
Yeah, you might go from genuinely wanting to help others or contribute to think, okay, I just need to look out for number one now. It's a subtle shift in motivation, but profound.
And all along, our minds are working overtime to make sense of this, right? The source talks about internal justifications, how we explain away our own negative actions.
Yes, this is such a critical defense mechanism. Our brains hate that feeling when our actions don't match our self-image, that cognitive dissonance.
Right.
So we construct stories. Maybe we tell ourselves we had to do it for self-protection, or that the other person, well, they kind of deserved it.
It eases the guilt momentarily.
Exactly. But the danger, as the source points out, is that these justifications make it easier to do it again. They pave the way for those behaviors to become, well, more normal for us, more frequent.
We're basically rewriting our own rules in our head. Now, the source also really stressed that we don't make these shifts in a vacuum. Our environment, our relationships, they matter hugely.
Massively. Think about those toxic environments we sometimes find ourselves in, a super competitive workplace, maybe a difficult family situation, or even just hanging out with a negative crowd. The source calls them emotional traps.
Okay, so like in a cutthroat job.
Yeah, someone who genuinely values teamwork might feel pressured to, I don't know, sabotage a colleague or take undue credit just to keep their job. They compromise their integrity for survival.
And it's those small compromises, isn't it? The source suggests they're particularly insidious. Each little bend makes the next one easier.
It's that slippery slope idea again. The lines just get blurrier and blurrier.
Yeah.
And you can't ignore social pressure either. That basic human need to fit in, to be accepted, it's incredibly powerful. It can lead people to go along with things they wouldn't dream of doing on their own.
Just to belong. Even if it means feeling alienated from your own values later, the source even mentioned family dynamics, like growing up where it was always about winning, about being the best.
Right. If you learned early on that you had to be manipulative or hyper-competitive just to get by in your own family, those patterns can become deeply ingrained, almost like survival skills learned in childhood.
So the bad actions later in life might not even stem from malice, but from these learned behaviors.
Exactly. And in environments where it feels like everyone is just out for themselves, where collective well-being isn't valued,
Yeah.
well, even someone with strong principles can feel their own values starting to erode. It brings up that really tough question.
Yeah, the source poses it directly. Is it even worth trying to be good if everyone around you is playing a different game? That pressure is immense.
It really is. It makes sticking to your ethical guns feel isolating, almost pointless sometimes. Then there's the whole issue of power and control. That's another major theme.
Ah, yes, power. The source suggests it doesn't just reveal character, it can actually change it.
It's like an amplifier, isn't it?
Mm.
It can bring out existing tendencies, sure, but it can also create new ones. That feeling of invulnerability that sometimes comes with power, it's dangerous.
The feeling that the rules don't quite apply to you anymore.
Precisely. When people in charge feel like consequences are for other people, they might start making choices they never would have considered before. The source used that analogy of power creating a bubble.
A bubble? How so?
Like you're sort of insulated from reality, and
Uh-huh.
you stop seeing other people as equals. They become, I don't know, resources, obstacles, means to an end.
Wow. And the source brought up Napoleon, didn't it? From revolutionary idealist to, well, emperor.
Yeah, a stark historical example of how that drive for power and the experience of having it can fundamentally transform someone's initial ideals. It's not just theoretical. We see it happen.
And psychologically, what's the pull? Is it just the control itself?
Control's a big part of it. The source talks about how influencing others, shaping outcomes, can be almost addictive. There's this constant temptation to expand that influence.
And that's where ethical lines get crossed, often with self-justification, like, I know best, or the ends justify the means.
Exactly that, which underscores the huge moral responsibility that comes with power. You have to constantly check yourself, your motives, because the risk, the source warns, is becoming the very thing you might have once opposed.
Okay, let's circle back to self-justification because it seems so central to all of this, the way the mind rationalizes things.
It's fundamental. We really need to see ourselves in a positive light. So when our actions clash with our values, our brain scrambles to create a story that makes it okay. It protects our self-esteem.
The greater good argument seems like a classic one. I had to do this slightly shady thing, but it's for a good cause overall.
Oh yeah, and the source calls that potentially an illusion of morality.
Yeah.
You focus so much on the intended positive outcome that you kind of ignore or minimize the harm done along the way.
And that ties into cognitive dissonance, right? That uncomfortable feeling.
Exactly. To get rid of that discomfort, we might subtly shift our values or reinterpret our actions to make them seem less problematic. We reduce the internal conflict.
The source had that example of someone who values honesty but starts telling small lies.
Little white lies, maybe. And then it just becomes easier. more normalized over time. Each justification builds on the last.
So these aren't just one-off excuses, they actually reshape your moral landscape over time.
Absolutely. They create this path that seems logical from the inside, but it's leading you further and further from where you started, ethically speaking.
It's like you're paving the road away from your own values one justification at a time. Now, another really interesting angle the source raised was the pressure of idealized goodness, like society's expectation that good people should be perfect.
Yes, that pressure can be intense. This idea that you have to be impeccable, flawless, it can make people terrified of showing any vulnerability or making any mistakes.
They put on a mask.
Essentially, yeah. The source calls it a mask of goodness, projecting an image that doesn't necessarily match what's going on inside.
That sounds exhausting. And the source suggested trying to live up to that can actually backfire, right? Like suppressing your own needs or limits leads to resentment.
Exactly. And when goodness feels like this impossible, unattainable standard, it can ironically lead to moral hypocrisy. You might look altruistic, but your private actions are all about self-interest because you're so worn out trying to keep up appearances.
It's like the fear of disappointing people prevents you from actually being real about your flaws.
And that stops you from learning. The source makes a brilliant point. True goodness isn't about never messing up. It's about recognizing when you do mess up and learning from it, having humility.
But if you're constantly trying to project perfection,
You can't do that. You get disconnected from your own humanity, from the messy reality of being human. You can't integrate the less than perfect parts.
which kind of leads perfectly into this idea of navigating the gray zone of morality, accepting that complexity.
Yes, this is so important. Morality isn't binary. We all have the capacity for both good and, well, not so good actions. Trying to pretend we're only good actually stops us from dealing with our own shadow.
The shadow, like Carl Jung's idea, the parts of ourselves we repress.
Exactly. Jung said something like, we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. It's powerful stuff.
So facing your shadow isn't about embracing evil.
Not at all. It's about understanding the whole picture, integrating all of who you are. Because if you try to just push down anger or jealousy or whatever, they tend to pop up unexpectedly, sometimes in really unhelpful ways.
Jung also said, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. That seems relevant here.
Hugely relevant. It's about that inner work, looking honestly at your own impulses and complexities, rather than just focusing on the external image. That's where real, authentic morality comes from.
From understanding the full spectrum within yourself.
Precisely. And that brings us, really, to the final core message from the source. The incredible power of self-knowledge. It's presented as the key defense against all these pressures we've talked about.
How does that work? How does knowing yourself protect your values?
Well, the source describes it as building an inner fortress. When you understand your own desires, your fears, your triggers, your limits, you're less likely to be swept away by external forces or your own knee-jerk reactions.
But that requires real honesty, doesn't it? Looking at yourself, warts and all.
It takes courage, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not always comfortable. The source suggests things like regular self-reflection, like actually taking time to think about your choices, your motives. Are you still aligned with what you truly believe? Or are you drifting?
That regular check-in sounds crucial, catching those small drifts before they become big ones.
And remember that Jung quote about awakening. Self-knowledge lets you make deliberate choices, not just react automatically. You're more likely to act from your core values. Plus, it makes it easier to admit mistakes.
Ah, right. Because you're not trying to maintain that perfect image anymore.
Exactly. You can say, okay, I messed up there, learn from it, and reinforce your ethical resilience. It builds strength.
So self-knowledge is like an internal compass, really, guiding you based on who you actually are, not who you think you should be.
Beautifully put. It guides you toward choices aligned with your true essence. Goodness, then, isn't some fixed state you achieve. It's this continuous process, this constant navigation between our inner world and the outer world.
And recognizing the gray areas, the complexities within ourselves, that's not a weakness.
Oh, it's a strength. It's a vital step towards self-awareness, towards a more authentic kind of goodness.
So maybe the goal isn't perfection after all. Maybe it's authenticity, understanding and integrating all parts of ourselves, the light and the shadow.
I think that's exactly it.
Which leaves us with a final thought, kind of building on the source's ending. A question for you, listening. Are you up for that challenge? The challenge of looking inward, embarking on that journey of self-discovery to really understand your own complexities. Because maybe that's how you strengthen the true goodness within. It's about that reflection, that self-awareness.
It's definitely a journey, not a destination. And just being willing to look inward is maybe the most important step. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into, well, the complexities of being human.